A deer trapped in the mud, a duck asking firefighters for help, a goat hanging on a phone line. Sit back and relax, here are 10 animals that asked for help when they got into trouble. At first sight, the deer is a rather supple, fast and flexible animal. It manages to escape from its predators and all kinds of dangers with a disconcerting ease and agility. And like all its fellow creatures, once it has been running around all day, it looks for a damp place to roll in the mud and get rid of parasites. Bad luck for our friend, the mud he meets that day is not a usual mud. He quickly finds himself stuck in a huge mountain of mud on a construction site, quickly becomes trapped and unable to move his limbs to get out of this situation alone. Even worse, he sinks into the mud as time goes by. And the color of his coat doesn't help matters since it perfectly matches the scenery in which he bathes. Fortunately, some local people noticed that in the huge mountain of mud, there was a living animal. And as it was also dangerous for the men to go and look for it, they had the idea to take the poor animal out with a backhoe shovel. It was very difficult for them to distinguish the animal buried in the pile of mud, especially since it was particularly slippery. But they were able to catch the animal without injuring it, by lifting the huge pile of mud on which the deer was lying, probably scared to death, and placing it on the ground. Very quickly, the animal got back on its feet and was able to walk away. Let's hope that next time, it will be more careful before taking its nap anywhere. This sea turtle was quietly swimming in the murky waters of the ocean. It was probably looking for something to eat, when it had an unfortunate encounter. Omnivorous by nature, the sea turtle went to look for a prey to fill its stomach in shell colonies. But bad luck, that day the shell decided to rebel. While our turtle was shopping, a large shell stuck to its back and decided not to let it go. Terribly embarrassed, the turtle who was swimming met a human, and asked for help to the latter, making him understand openly that it was not going well. Indeed, the shell was heavy, which made its movements rather painful. Fortunately, the man, having quickly realized that the tortoise was in distress, quickly removed the parasite from its shell. The relieved animal swam for a while near his savior, before going to join his fellow creatures. Lady Turtle, it might be time to consider algae as a meal. Vegetables are good too. Do you like this video? Then don't hesitate to give us a like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive all the notifications so that you don't miss any of our upcoming content. It seems that bears are excellent swimmers. At least, that's what these two cubs were taught to do, so they ended up in the middle of a lake. These little brown bears were hunting near the shores of a lake, and their overdeveloped sense of smell led them to get a little too close to the shore, as they were attracted by the fish that were there. Unfortunately, these little cubs didn't know how to swim yet. Thinking they could float, they jumped into the water to follow the fish. Caught between the relentless flow of the lake, the two cubs were trapped for some time before a fisherman in his boat came across them. The two cubs clung to the hull of the boat, waiting for the fisherman to come to their aid. The man then grabbed his net to save the two cubs from drowning. The fisherman was able to get them back on the boat and onto dry land. More fear than harm, but let's hope they learn their lesson. Foxes are smart, agile and sometimes devious little creatures. The finesse of their sense of smell often leads them to their prey without worry. But before becoming a real hardened fox, it is necessary to have a rather convincing hunting experience and especially to have known how to avoid falling into traps. Driven by hunger and the desire to have a nice little chicken for dinner, this fox got carried away until he forgot about the obstacles that could be in his way. Indeed, while sniffing the ground in search of food, the animal accidentally got his head stuck in a jar. Master Fox then blindly embarked on an interminable walk along the side of the road, his head stuck inside the jar. He was terrified, and we understand him. Fortunately, the animal crossed paths with a man who, upon noticing its distress, rushed to remove its head from the jar. Terrified but at the same time relieved, the little fox immediately ran away by hiding in the foliage. Here is a nice lesson to give to his fellow creatures: don't just use your nose, your eyes are important too. Not to be caught red-handed is one thing, but the head in the jar is another. The dolphin is a very intelligent animal. It has the faculty to communicate easily with the human beings that it meets. It is also a very greedy animal and fond of the good things in life. Amateur of refined food, it is always in search of something to put under the beak. A good sardine, some shrimps, tasty little anchovies, etc. But it is precisely by wanting to please his taste buds that this dolphin of the Hawaiian waters bit the hook of a fisherman, who obviously did not have the intention of catching such a big fish. After quickly realizing that it was a trap, trap, the dolphin struggled to escape. As it had never had to deal with this kind of trap, the dolphin let its fins get entangled with the net of the fishing rod. As a result, he ended up with the hook and the line stuck in his fin, which certainly hurt him a lot. While swimming, the poor dolphin met a diver who quickly realized that something was wrong when he saw the wild dolphin swimming a little too close to him. The diver first removed the hook that was hurting the dolphin and then took a pair of scissors to cut the line. The dolphin, relieved, swam close to his savior in gratitude before melting into the depths of the ocean. Koalas are animals known for their kindness and docility. They don't ask for much to be happy. In their forest, these animals live on eucalyptus and fresh water. Well, since we are talking about fresh water, this koala was walking alone in the forest, climbing trees, swinging between branches. But too much effort sometimes leads to a moment of fatigue, and in such moments, a small water point to quench your thirst is welcome. Except that in his case, the koala has not managed to find a source of water to quench his thirst, and the terrible heat that floods the tropical forests only makes his need for water even more painful and unbearable. The koala had to endure this thirst for a very long time, until he met some cyclists who were passing by the nature reserve where he was and who fortunately had bottles of water with them. The koala then immediately went towards them to ask for help. Showing obvious signs of tiredness and thirst, the animal literally threw himself on the water bottle to empty it completely, drinking with great gulps. Once quenched, the koala was able to resume its journey. The hawk is a formidable bird of prey, fighting against all odds to find prey. But the wind this time was a little too violent for this falcon, which, while looking for food for its young, met a huge hurricane on its way, in Houston in the United States. To protect itself from storms, the raptor found refuge in an empty cab with open windows. It is then that he surprises the driver of the vehicle who, while joining his cab, discovers the frightened animal. The latter, looking haggard, seemed terrified and vulnerable to the violent winds of the ongoing storm. He refused to even leave this protective and reassuring place. If he hadn't found this shelter, the hawk would have certainly left some feathers during his journey or worse. After nicely naming the raptor Harvey, Russo, the cab driver, made sure that the raptor was not injured and then released it back into the wild. Be prepared to witness one of the most dramatic scenes you will ever see. It is always very pleasant to see a mother duck followed by her young. The ducklings, still very young, follow their mother at the pace, not to fall in the dreaded traps of the life. The fact of following their mother who holds the head of file, brings them safety and appeasement. But sometimes life can be very cruel to the most vulnerable. While trying to cross a highway with her young, a duck lived a dramatic moment. After the crossing had gone smoothly, the duck turned around to make sure her offspring had followed her. Unfortunately, most of her ducklings had fallen into a manhole, being small enough to fit through the grate. Then, in a panic, the cane started to quack and quack, which attracted the attention of firemen who were passing by. Seeing that the duck was terrified about the fate of its young, the firemen then embarked on a very perilous rescue operation. At their head, a frightened mother duck, who didn't know if she should run away or wait for her young. Little by little, the firemen managed to get the birds out of the sewers one by one and put them near their mother. The little family was reunited and released into the lake where they were supposed to go before their misadventure. This young African deer was running through a deserted land, eager to join his family. But, certainly because of the rush, the young animal did not realize that the ground under his feet was getting softer and softer and that he was sinking deeper and deeper into the earth. Indeed, it was difficult for him to discern wet soil from dry soil. This little misstep led him to be totally engulfed by the muddy ground. Seeing that he was struggling with all his strength to keep his head out of the mud, a man jumped without thinking into the huge lake of mud, risking his life to rescue the animal. The animal was securely tied to his rescuer with a rope. After that, the man swam back to dry land with the deer behind him. The deer, which was completely smeared with mud, almost drowned in the mud since its thin limbs would never have allowed it to swim out of its situation. Once on dry land, the animal shook off the mud that covered it before running back to its family as it had originally planned. Goats are generally quite docile animals. Like sheep, they instinctively follow the other animals in the herd and follow their master's orders without question. But even though they are herd animals, it often happens that a goat wants to separate from its group to go and enjoy some quiet moments away from the bleating of its fellow animals. And it is not Mr. Segan's goat who will tell you otherwise. While trying to get a moment alone, this intrepid goat unfortunately got its horns caught in an electric wire and remained suspended a few meters above the ground for a long time. Panicked, it then began to bleat until a group of men passing by noticed the animal in distress. Although she was not injured, the situation was critical as she was at risk of dehydration and even death from a heart attack. At first, using a ladder, the men tried to slide it down, but seeing that this technique was not effective, they then used a rope, which they tied to the legs of the goat to bring it down. So, what do you think of these 10 animals who knew how to ask for help when they needed it most? Have you ever had the opportunity to rescue an animal from danger? Tell us about it in the comments.